Worship ministry is hard. If you're watching this, you already know that. But if you have a vision of getting from where you are to where God's leading you, then this is for you. Hey, my name's Jeff. I'm a worship ministry coach. I've had the opportunity of being a worship leader for 20 plus years in a church that went from kind of small to pretty big. And then after that, I joined a ministry called Time to Revive for 7 plus years. And it travels around the country, working to get churches to work together and to go out and share the gospel, make disciples. And in that, I had the opportunity to work primarily with worship leaders, going into 50 plus communities where we're working with them to put together worship services, to getting them to work together as worship ministries. So I've had the opportunity to get a pretty unique perspective of the American church. I've led with thousands of different teams, and I've had the opportunity to coach hundreds of different worship leaders. What I've found is that worship leaders are working harder now than ever, and are maybe more frustrated than ever. And across the board, what I'm seeing is a constant pattern of different struggles that we're seeing in worship ministry. One of the big ones that I'm seeing right now is just burnout. You know, oftentimes worship leaders have a personality. They want to be helpful. They want to do something bigger than themselves. So they jump all in, and they have a hard time to say no. If you're listening to this, you probably are in that camp. But we've got to figure out, how do we tackle this monster called burnout in the church, and how do we create a good balance where we're working hard in the church, but we aren't burning ourselves out completely. Another one I see across the board is just lack of volunteers. How do we figure out how to mobilize the church in a way that uses their gifts? How do we as leaders gather them and resource them and figure out how to get them involved in what God's doing in your church? Another one's just lack of confidence. So many worship leaders that I meet lack the confidence to be able to carry out what God's calling them to do. They're just eking by because they want to be confident in what they're doing, and there's not a culture that stretches beyond their comfort zone. Another one's just lack of skill or knowledge. Right? Just the need for skills to be developed, for the knowledge to know how to develop those things. There's also just frustrations, whether it be in the church or on their team, just figuring out how to get past these frustrations, these obstacles that happen in ministry. And last is just a feeling of feeling kind of stuck. Like you don't really know what to do. You've kind of gotten to a place, maybe you put in years, maybe you're just starting, I don't know. There's lots of different situations that you could be in, but maybe you don't feel like you know how to get from where you are to where God's leading you. You know, I believe that worship ministry is one of the hardest jobs in the church, and it's worth investing in. You know, aside from the lead pastor, I think it's one of the most stressful jobs. You could argue that it carries more stress than most any other role in the church, aside from the lead pastor. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is it affects everyone. There are lots of roles in the church that aren't seen by people. It's maybe in the back, children's ministry, youth ministry, lots of important roles. I'm not downplaying that at all. But worship ministry it's so in your face. Everyone is going to walk into that sanctuary, and they're going to be involved in the worship. Along with that is that it's the most visible. Everyone can see how worship is going. If it kind of stinks that week, everyone sees it. If it's really good, everyone sees it. It's very visible. It permeates what is happening on a Sunday morning. So it's very visible. Next is everyone has an opinion about it, right? Not only do they see it, but they're going to have an opinion. Whether they share it or not, everyone has an opinion of how it's going or what they're wanting, their preferences, what they're looking for. That's the thing. If you're in worship ministry, you know that you can't please everyone, and you won't please everyone. And frankly, there's an aspect to it that on any given Sunday, there are people who have an opinion that it's not good at exactly the same time that there are people that are saying, man, this is so good, right? That's just kind of the nature of worship ministry and the challenge of it. And lastly, it's the most critiqued, right? There are lots of things that happen on any given weekend in your church, but what's the thing that gets picked apart the most when you evaluate? I almost guarantee you that it's going to be the worship. It's not the pastor's message. It's not the first impressions. It's not the children's ministry. It's not all of this stuff. What's going to be picked apart the most is the worship ministry. And that's because of these things in a lot of ways. So it's challenging and it's stressful as a worship leader. And because of that, it's so important that we aren't trying to tackle these things alone. That's part of why we have developed Worship Ministry Coach, because we believe that everyone is better with a coach. There's a reason that the best athletes in the world all have coaches. They could easily argue that they're already the best, but they understand that in order to reach their potential, they are better and will go further, faster, if they have a coach with them who's walking alongside of them, helping them see what they don't see to reach the goals that they have. Which brings us to why a coach. Why do you need a coach? I'm going to talk through a number of them. I'm not going to try to write all of these down because there's a ton of them. The benefits of having a coach is, one, it gives you a widened perspective. It helps you see things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise see, right? There's beneficial feedback. It's hearing from someone else other than just yourself or just your team. You get outside of that bubble, right? That is so easy to get in because you can be blinded when you are in it every week. Getting another perspective, broadened perspective, but also beneficial feedback. Almost always you're going to get a heightened, better commitment level if you have a coach with you. Along with that, you're going to get accountability. You're going to have somebody kind of holding your feet to the fire of, you said you were going to do this, you need to do it. Having a coach next to you is always going to give you that extra benefit of accountability to hold you to the commitments that you made. Greater productivity. You're going to get more done when you have a coach with kind of their hand in your back. The other is just support and encouragement. You need somebody to say, keep going. Come on, you're doing it. You're doing good. Not only are they saying, here are the things you need to work on, but they're also saying, good job. You want someone in your corner that's going to celebrate when you succeed, right? Refined skills. A coach is going to be able to look at you and they're going to have the ability to kind of tweak some things. Maybe, in the athletic world, it's maybe your shot is just a little off because you kind of keep kicking your leg out when you're shooting, and that's shooting, throwing off your shot. In worship ministry, it's, kind of giving you some exercises, some things that maybe you could try to get further down the field. It helps you build self-awareness, right? It just helps you see yourself more clearly when someone else is kind of reflecting back to you. It helps you grow out of your comfort zones. It gives you clarity and focus. And lastly, and very practically, they just have tools and resources that maybe you've not discovered or experienced yet. So there's lots of reasons why a coach is beneficial, and that's why we've developed Worship Ministry Coach. And we've put it into a framework that we think really is helpful. The framework imagines your ministry like a guitar. Now, there are lots of different shapes and forms of guitars, whether it's electric or acoustic or whatever. But ultimately, it's designed for one purpose, to make music. And we've broken down worship ministry into 6 different categories, which we view kind of like the strings on this guitar. And when they play together and they're tuned up, they do what they're supposed to do, make music. Now, in the framework, the tuners are your leadership, and the tuning is the vision that God has given to you for your church. Now, guitars don't get tuned just once, right? They're constantly needing to be adjusted, constantly needing to be tuned to the tuning or the vision that you have to make the music that you're wanting to make. The Holy Spirit is the one that's playing the instrument, but it's our job to keep it in tune, because when a string is out, it affects the whole thing, right? If you've ever had an out-of-tune guitar or instrument, you know that it's so important to have every aspect of it in tune. Otherwise, it's just going to be distracting. It's going to throw things off. The way we're framing it is we're looking at these 6 categories and we're asking the question, how do we make sure that we're kind of in tune in each of them and there's not any of them that are sliding in and out of where we want to go as we're growing as a ministry. So I want to break down these 6 categories. So I want to show you this framework and kind of break it down for you so that you can see how it plays into your ministry. So we've broken it down into these 6 categories. The first is leadership. That's simply you as the worship leader, whatever leadership structure that you have put in place for your ministry, that's what that is. It's looking at it and going, what are the different things? You know, are we in line with the vision of the church? Are we executing? What kind of maturity do we have? Do we have humility? You know, it's looking at the leadership, because we recognize that the speed of the leader, speed of the team. If your leadership is lacking, so is your team going to be, and your ministry. Next is team. And we're looking at all the people, all the different teams that you have in place. Are they working correctly? Do you have enough people involved in them? Are the right people involved? Are they equipped? You know, all of those things. We're looking at the team aspect. Next is administration. The administration in worship ministry a lot of times is what holds people back. Maybe you're not planning effectively. You're not communicating very well. Maybe you don't have systems in place that take pressure off of you as the worship leader. So the administration is so important, and it's a vital part of a healthy ministry. Next is the components. And this is just the things, the kind of the building blocks of what you typically would think of on a Sunday morning. You know, the components would be the songs that you pick. It's how the different elements work together. Are they working? Are they biblical? And do they flow together in a way that works and is excellent? So that's components. Next is the equipment. Now, the equipment is very important, because we all recognize you could have the most amazing band in the world, but if your audio equipment sounds like crud, you're going to sound like crud, right? So our equipment, though they are just tools, but they are important to fulfill the vision and mission of your ministry. And lastly is environment. The environment is not only the physical environment, as in like the sanctuary and how it feels and looks and the lighting and blah, 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 all that stuff. That's part of it. But it's also broader than that. It's looking at your community as a whole. It's looking at your church. It's looking at the history of the body that you are a part of, because it's really difficult to have a healthy ministry in the midst of an unhealthy culture. So it's important to look at that environment, because it could be affecting and creeping into the health of your ministry. So that's kind of the framework that we put together. And we built it for worship leaders just like you to help you to get from where you are to where God is leading you. And our goal is to educate, to encourage, and to equip so you can fulfill that vision that God's given to you in your life and ministry. So we're looking to educate. Our goal is to curate as much information as we possibly can. I want to reiterate this. I don't pretend to know everything about ministry. I don't. But I have a lot of experience, and I've seen a lot of things. I've tried a lot of things that haven't worked, and I've also tried some things that do. So my goal isn't to tell you the thing to do as much as to collect as many things to try as possible. Things that I've seen that have worked, things that maybe would be encouraging to you, things that would help point you to where you are or help you get from where you are to where God's leading you. So we want to educate, but we also want to encourage. We want to encourage you to keep going. I run into so many worship leaders who are just on the edge and are thinking about quitting, are really struggling. And I think it's so important that you have people around you who understand what you're going through and are also encouraging you to not just give up, but to push through and to keep going and to fulfill what God's called you to do in your church and in your life. And then lastly is to equip. I don't want to just throw information at you. I want to actually give you frameworks and processes and systems and tools and resources that have worked, that are as plug and play as possible. Practical things that will help you get from A to B. And that's what I hope this channel will be about. So we plan to do that through weekly videos, posts, and a blog on our website, newsletter, a monthly podcast that we're looking to do, where we're going to just interview normal worship leaders, real worship leaders with real answers to what's worked for them and how they're doing ministry. We'll also be involved with social media. We're planning to develop some different courses and things, and just in general, lots of different resources that can maybe help you in your ministry. So if this sounds like something that's of interest and benefit to you, there are 3 immediate things that you can do to help this channel benefit your ministry. 1 is like and subscribe, as you know. 2 is you can go to worshipministrycoach.com. And we have something on there called the Worship Ministry Coach Sound Check. And it walks you through an assessment of these 6 categories. It has 30 questions, and it will kind of kick out a report to you that will say, okay, here are some of the things that you're really strong in. Here are the things that you need to work on. The sound check is meant to be an assessment tool that helps you assess where you are so that you can better know where you need to go and how to get there. And third is you can go to worshipministrycoach.com and you could schedule a free 20-minute call with me where we can just kind of in general see kind of where you're at. And I've put together different packages that maybe we could work together to help you get from where you are to where God's leading you. So we're very excited about locking arms together and working together to make our worship ministries the very best that it possibly can be. So check out the resources at the website. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.